They say marriages don't break in explosions, they die quietly, one unspoken word at a time. Mine died in a single sentence. She's my true love. Those were the words that ended 15 years of love, loyalty, and dreams. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stood there, numb, then reached for my phone. "Who are you calling?" he asked, his voice trembling. I looked him in the eye and said, "My lawyer." The day began beautifully, or at least, I wanted it to. It was our 15th wedding anniversary, and I had spent weeks planning it. I wanted to remind us of who we used to be. The couple that danced barefoot in the kitchen, shared cold pizza at 2 a.m., and made promises under the stars. Back then, Michael was my entire world. I believed in him, believed in us. He used to tell me, "Emily, you're my home." And I foolishly thought a man who calls you his home could never leave. That morning, I woke up early to prepare his favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with a dash of cream, toast with strawberry jam, and coffee just the way he liked it. I set the table with the silver cutlery we'd received on our wedding day. But the seat across from me stayed empty. The coffee grew cold. His message came 2 hours later. "Sorry, early meeting. Don't wait for me." It stung, but I brushed it off. He had been distant for months, coming home late, forgetting small things, avoiding conversations. I convinced myself it was just stress, the pressure of his lectures, research, and university politics. I didn't want to see the cracks. Because if I did, I'd have to face the truth that maybe, love wasn't enough anymore. By evening, I'd turned our living room into a memory lane. Candles flickered softly against framed photos, our wedding, our honeymoon, the day we bought our first house. I cooked his favorite dinner, lasagna, garlic bread, a bottle of red wine waiting on the table. I even wore the red silk dress he once said made me look unforgettable. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, trying to recognize the woman staring back. My eyes had grown tired, the sparkle replaced by years of trying to be everything for everyone. But tonight, I wanted to feel like me again. The clock ticked past 8, then 9. No calls, no texts, just the lonely sound of the wind outside. I stared at my phone, willing it to light up. It didn't. When I finally heard the door open, my heart leapt. "Michael," I breathed, forcing a smile. "You're home." He looked at me, startled, as if he'd forgotten the significance of the day. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly messy, and there was something different in his eyes, something distant, unfamiliar. "I made dinner," I said, gesturing to the table. "Your favorite." He looked at the candles, the photos, the effort, and instead of smiling, he sighed. That sound was heavier than any words. He sat down, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. "Emily," he began, "we need to talk." My stomach dropped. Every story that starts with that line ends badly. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. He exhaled, running his hand through his hair. "There's something I have to tell you. And you deserve to know." He couldn't look at me. That was my first clue that whatever was coming would change everything. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said softly. "But, I met someone." The room went silent. I felt my heart stop. My brain couldn't process the words. "Met someone," I repeated, barely above a whisper. He nodded, guilt clouding his face. "She's one of my students." I blinked, trying to understand if I'd heard right. "A student," he nodded again. "She's not a child, Emily. She's 23. She's brilliant, passionate, she reminds me of who I used to be." The air left my lungs. The man I had built my life around was describing another woman as if she were some kind of salvation. "And me?" I asked quietly. "What am I?" He looked up, eyes filled with tears. "You're my family, my comfort, but she's my true love." True love. The words sliced through me like glass. 15 years, 15 birthdays, 15 Christmases, 15 years of shared dreams, and all of it reduced to comfort. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to ask him how he could do this to me. But all I could do was stare. My fingers trembled as I picked up my wine glass and set it down again. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "About 6 months. 6 months. While I was planning our anniversary, he was planning a future with someone else. While I was buying him gifts, he was giving someone else his time." I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out into the dark street. I remembered the nights I waited for him, the dinners gone cold, the excuses. The way he'd smiled at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd started wearing cologne again. It all made sense now. Every sign I'd ignored lined up like puzzle pieces forming a picture I didn't want to see. Behind me, his voice cracked. I never meant to hurt you. I turned to face him, my voice calm, almost eerily so. You didn't just hurt me, Michael. You erased me. He flinched, tears gathering in his eyes. Please don't make this harder than it already is. I laughed bitterly. Harder? You just told me you've been sleeping with your student, and you're asking me not to make it hard. He stood, reaching out as if to touch me. I stepped back. I didn't want his touch. Not anymore. I think we should take some time apart, he said carefully. Figure out what we both want. What I want, I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. I wanted us. I wanted this marriage to mean something. But apparently, what you want is a student who makes you feel young again. The silence that followed was suffocating. He sat back down, his face buried in his hands. I'm sorry. Sorry. The word echoed like a hollow bell. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal. Sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase the image of another woman taking what used to be yours. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up my phone, and scrolled to my contacts. My heart was steady now. My tears had dried before they could even fall. Who are you calling? He asked, looking up. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice firm and clear. My lawyer. He froze. Emily, wait, we can talk. No, Michael, we've done enough talking. You said she's your true love. So go find out if she still loves you when she sees who you really are. And with that, I walked upstairs, shut the bedroom door, and finally let the tears fall. But they weren't tears of heartbreak, they were tears of awakening. Because for 15 years, I had loved a man more than I loved myself. And tonight, that ended. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt something strange, peace. Painful, raw, but peaceful. I realized that sometimes, the worst heartbreak isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your freedom. And maybe, just maybe, losing him would be the best thing that ever happened to me. The night I called my lawyer, I thought I'd lost everything. My marriage, my love, my future, all gone with one betrayal. But what I didn't know then was that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find yourself again. That night I broke, but in the breaking, I began to rebuild. The divorce process wasn't just paperwork, it was a battlefield of memories. Every signature felt like a knife carving the word ending into my skin. But I had made up my mind. There was no going back. I refused to stay in a marriage built on lies and convenience. Michael tried to talk me out of it at first. He sent flowers, messages, long emails filled with apologies and explanations. He said he'd made a mistake, that he still loved me, that we could go to therapy. But I had spent too many nights begging him silently with my eyes to see me, to love me, to notice me, and he hadn't. Now that I was walking away, suddenly he remembered my worth. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of saving me after destroying me. The first few weeks were brutal. The house was too quiet, too empty. Every room carried his scent, his presence, his ghost. I couldn't sit at the dinner table without seeing his chair, couldn't pass by the wardrobe without imagining his clothes hanging next to mine. So I packed everything and left. I rented a small apartment downtown, one bedroom, old wooden floors, peeling paint on the walls. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a cup of tea, surrounded by boxes, and cried until my throat hurt. Not because I missed him, but because I was mourning the woman I used to be, the woman who believed love could fix anything. The mornings came slowly. I forced myself to wake up, shower, eat, breathe. Some days, that was all I could manage. I spent hours walking through the city, watching strangers laugh, couples hold hands, parents with children. I used to have that, someone to come home to. Now, I came home to silence. But with time, that silence started to feel less like loneliness and more like peace. Then came the anger, the kind that burned quietly beneath the surface. Anger for all the years I put him first. For every dream I put on hold because he needed my support. For every time I silenced my voice to keep the peace. I had built his world, and he had walked out of it without looking back. So I began to rebuild mine. I enrolled in an online writing course, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. Words became my therapy. Late at night, when the world was asleep, I poured my pain into sentences, raw, honest, unfiltered. At first, they were just journal entries, small confessions typed through tears. But soon, I started turning them into stories. Stories of love, loss, and rediscovery. One day, on a whim, I created a blog and called it After the Vows. I posted one of my stories anonymously. To my surprise, it got hundreds of views overnight. Women began to comment, sharing their own stories of heartbreak, betrayal, and resilience. It was like I had opened a door for all the silent voices that had been hiding behind smiles. "Thank you," one woman wrote. "Your story made me feel less alone." That comment changed everything. I realized that my pain had a purpose. My story wasn't just mine anymore, it was a mirror for others who needed hope. Meanwhile, Michael's life was falling apart. I didn't seek updates, but the whispers found their way to me. The university had launched an investigation into his relationship. The student, apparently, had dropped out, unable to handle the scrutiny. His reputation was ruined. When I heard, I didn't feel satisfaction, just pity. He had thrown away everything for something fleeting. Months passed. I learned to love solitude. I decorated my apartment with things that made me happy: plants, books, art prints. I painted the walls a soft blue, the color of calm. Slowly, I stopped checking my phone for his messages. I stopped replaying our arguments in my head. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. One rainy evening, while walking through the park, I saw a girl sitting on a bench, crying into her hands. She couldn't have been more than 20. I hesitated but then walked over and sat beside her. "Rough night?" I asked gently. She looked up, her mascara streaked down her cheeks. "He said he loved me," she whispered. "He was my professor. And now he just left." My heart clenched. The pieces connected instantly. She was his student, the same one he had called his true love. I didn't tell her who I was. I just listened. I let her cry. When her sobs quieted, I said softly, "You'll heal. One day, this pain won't define you." She looked at me, her voice trembling. "How do you know?" I smiled faintly. "Because I was you once." She stared at me in confusion, but I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I stood up, handed her my umbrella, and said, "Don't let him take any more of you. You deserve better." Then I walked away, my heart heavy but oddly lighter than before. That night, I wrote my most powerful blog post yet, "When True Love Lies." It wasn't about revenge. It was about healing, forgiveness, and self-worth. It went viral within days. Messages poured in from women all over the world. Publishers reached out. One of them offered to turn my story into a book. I signed the contract under my own name, Emily Carter. The same name that once felt small now carried strength. A year later, my book was released. On our 15th anniversary, a memoir of heartbreak and rebirth. I stood at a small bookstore, signing copies, surrounded by strangers who had somehow become part of my journey. They told me my story gave them courage. Some cried, some hugged me, and as I looked at them, I realized I had become the woman I needed during my darkest days. Then, as fate would have it, I saw him again. Michael stood at the end of the signing line, holding a copy of my book. His hair was grayer, his eyes tired. He waited quietly until it was his turn. When he finally stepped forward, he gave a sad smile. "You look happy," he said softly. I met his gaze, calm and sure. "I am." He hesitated. "Do you ever think about us?" I closed the book I was signing and handed it to him. "Every time I remember who I never want to be again." He nodded slowly, guilt shadowing his face. "You deserved better." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "And I finally gave it to myself." He walked away without another word. I watched him leave, not with bitterness, but with peace. The man who once defined my life was now just a closed chapter. When the last reader left, I looked at the stack of books on the table and smiled. My story had started with heartbreak, but it ended with freedom. Because sometimes, the moment you lose the person you thought you couldn't live without is the moment you finally start living. That night, as I sat by my window watching the city lights flicker, I whispered to myself the words that had carried me through it all. "You are your own true love.